Thank you, Minister Prynne. Thank you, my friend, gents. Looking forward. Olive, Catherine, we have work to do tonight, and it is good to be back. Thank you. I have the luxury of life, particularly now that I have retired for 5 years, of indulging in my passion. I cannot believe that I've had a career where I can be curious and curiouser, stand behind and collect lots of data, play with it, and I get paid for it. Wow. I also have that luxury, like many of you. I have spent my career as a teacher, and the thing I miss most about my retirement are my students, because they come along, they're curious, they do all the hard work, they bring the questions, the answers, I learn from them, and I get paid for it. It's a great life. And what I've been doing is updating, working on this whole notion of what these meta-analyses are, to the point where I think we're at the stage where the days of evidence are becoming over. We've got so much evidence. The days of implementing evidence are here. And I think it's not just my work, but many others. 20 years ago, I think there'd be very few principals in the world that would have gone to the research data when they're making decisions about schools. Same in ministries. That's not true anymore. For the last 9 years in Australia, I've had an alternative life. I went to the dark side. Australia, like Germany, has a federal system where we have 8 states and territories. We have a federal government that owns no schools. And they do own an organisation called the Australian Institute for Teachers and School Leaders. And I've been the cabinet-appointed chair of that for 9 years. And it's responsible for the quality of teachers, the quality of school leaders, and the quality of initial teacher education. And I have to say, I've thoroughly enjoyed doing it. Across the different director generals and ministers, I've had to deal with 66 because we changed them a lot. But seeing policy is fascinating. The third thing that's happened to me since I published that book in 2009 was that a team decided they wanted to implement it in schools. Now, I'm not very good in schools. I can give a talk, but then you know when you leave, nothing happens. So I said to them, I'll let you do it provided you have an impact on students. Most professional learning stops with teachers. And the second thing is, it has to be scalable. You can't just have a small team. We are now at around 10,000 schools a year, and we've done probably 200,000-300,000 teachers, and I get all the data. And it's been very good. So what happened is over the last 15 years, I've had the luxury of looking at lots of different ways of looking at schools, but the other honour I have is I have the world's best critics. And I mean that positively, because in academia, that's what it's all about. I particularly like the New Zealand definition by legislation of a university. It is the critic and conscience of society. It doesn't mean to say I agree with all my critics, but I have learned a lot from them. And so in 2000, last year, I'm now up to 21 meta-analyses. Indeed, today I've just passed the 2,600 meta-analyses. You folk keep doing stuff, thank you. Now, I just need to pause, just to get it right. Meta-analysis, it's a very simple notion. It's a statistical synthesis of literature, and it asks 2 questions. The first question is, how big is the effect? You're going to introduce artificial intelligence into your school. Is it going to have a 0, a small, a medium, or a large effect? Is it positive or is it negative? Step 1. Step 2, often forgotten. You worked out what the effect is. Does that effect change in Kiel compared to Melbourne? In high school compared to primary school? In maths compared to music? And in the jargon, we call that the moderators. And it's been the quest of researchers in education for the last 100 years. And of course, I look at that. But what I find is it's very hard to find any. So when teachers and principals tell me, my class is different, get over it. It's not. That doesn't mean to say your children aren't unique, but what works best for 5-year-olds, 15-year-olds, 25-year-olds. It works best in maths and music. It works best in Melbourne and in Kiel. I know that's a struggle, but it is the case. It doesn't mean to say we shouldn't still keep looking for those moderators. And what also that means is that, yes, I think we have an evidence base. It's about the implementation. One of the other things is my work is about achievement, and I make no apologies for that. It is a function of schools, and I can't imagine what schools would look like if there wasn't a focus on achievement. I acknowledge there are many other aspects of schooling. For example, the economists have taught us that the best predictor of adult wealth, health, and happiness is not achievement at school. It's the number of years of schooling. So whether your school is inviting and students feel belonging is paramount, as you will hear. It is wonderful to be back in Kiel for another reason. There are groups of scholars out there that are looking at what I've done, the synthesis of achievement. They've looked at it in other areas. Motivation, and I think it's only in the last couple of weeks, our paper on self-concepts came out. And I think I'm delighted that others are looking at the ways in which we synthesize that literature. So thank you, my colleagues here in Kiel. This graph never ceases to amaze me. When I started, I did not expect it. You know the story. The problem of Germany is the teachers, the schools, they're terrible. I expected more in the red zone, below zero. There's hardly anything down there. Indeed, most of the stuff down there is perfectly sensible, like the effect size of bullying, minus 0.3, the effect size of anxiety, minus 0.5. There's hardly anything that we do to students that harm them. Isn't that good news? Now, there are a couple down there, like holding students back a year, minus 0.2, minus 0.3, one of the most invidious, nasty things we do in our school system. Minus 0.6, the largest negative effect size, labelling. Take two students of the same behaviour, the same personality, and label one. ADHD, Asperger's, autism. You get a minus 0.6 difference compared to the same kind of kid over here. Why? And this is the fun of meta-analysis. The data's easy. The why is the hard part. The why is simple. Expectations. These kids learn. They're not going to learn as well as another kid. This kid doesn't know that. Their parents demand that their child be treated uniquely, as if all autistic kids are the same. And notice what I didn't say. I didn't say autism wasn't real. It is. I'm saying the labelling is the invidious notion. And how we in education use labels to explain why children cannot. In medicine, we use labels as the first point for diagnosis. Very valuable. So I warn you, when you hear labels, often it's an explanation why the child can't. The child feels this, the teacher that alters the program to fit the fact that the child can't learn, and it's nonsense, and it's nasty, and it's minus 0.6. But I want to move to the positive side. 95 to 97% of things we do to kids enhances their achievement. It's easy. But this is why every teacher can argue correctly that what they do enhances achievement, because everyone can. This is why every policy will work, because everything works, almost. This is why every parent can tell you how to run your school. They're right. And that's why I want to change the question from what works to what works best. Because look at it. I use the average of all the 400 million students, 0.4. And the numbers are not that critical here today. It's the relativity. And I also know from other work that I've been doing is that any teacher, school or student in that plus 0.4 zone, the grey zone, they are making more than a year's progress for a year's input. And wow, I think that's impressive. We cannot ask more of you than that. And look at it. There is a lot of teachers and schools in that zone. And when I look at the data I have of Germany over the last few weeks, and I know it's PISA and that stuff, I can say with confidence 60% plus are already in that zone. What I'm going to tell you tonight, I would argue, validates what you're doing. I do not want you to change. Yes, like all of us, I want us all to improve. But if you're in the yellow zone, I don't think you've got any right to autonomy. I don't think you've got any right to teach as you wish. And I know what you're going to say, yellow people. Oh, but you don't understand Germany. You don't understand our curriculum. You don't understand the time we have with our students. You don't understand our assessment. You don't understand my school leaders. You don't. I thought, wait a moment. I want to look you in the eyes. How come? There's a teacher down the corridor in the grey zone with the same kids, same curriculum, same assessment, same leadership, same systems. It can be done. It's a matter of priorities. And what I'm fascinated in, did I say something naughty? What I'm fascinated in is what is the story between those in that grey zone compared to those in that yellow zone? And that's what I want to focus on tonight. And I have 4 messages. The first one, classroom climate, school climate. There's an order here. Climate, learning, leads to progress, to higher achievement. Unfortunately, over the last 20 years, your country and mine have become obsessed with achievement. We've become obsessed with high-achieving schools. Our parents are running around looking for the high-achieving schools. You publish league tables. What's high-achieving? I think it's killing us as a nation. I can show you, for example, that Australia has gone from the top 3 in PISA in 2000, 26th in the 2018, because we have focused on high achievers. And I'll show you that as we go through the session. If you want to start with high achievement, it's easy. Just select the students who are already high achievement. That's not our job, is it? Our job is to take every student who crosses the school gate. Our job is to take every student, no matter where they start, and add at least a year's growth for a year's input. That's equity. We're never, ever going to close the achievement gap. Everyone's not going to become Einstein, Madame Curie. But we can. And we do. And this is the work we do in schools. Work on the notion that we are going to enable every student, from where they start, to make that year's growth for a year's input. So let's look at climate. And I want to raise 3 issues. Firstly, I've spent a lot of time in our work looking at climate, and I particularly ask you to look at that notion of, is your school inviting? Do the students feel they belong here? I give you the Jenkins curve. Very simple. School leaders, go around the school, randomly ask 4 or 5 students in each grade, do you want to come to school to learn the stuff the teachers are teaching you here? 95% of 5-year-olds say yes. By the end of primary, the start of high school, at best, 4 out of 10 say yes. We've lost 60% of our students. And we know during COVID, all those surveys, why do you want to go back to school? Oh, to be with our friends. They didn't say to be with you. It has to change. Remember the adult health, wealth and happiness, sense of number of years of schooling? I would ask that we know whether our students feel inviting. I'm going to take a stronger line in my 2024 book when I say the fundamental role of the school leader is to know the culture and climate in every class and across the school. We can't wait for each teacher to get it right. It is absolutely critical. I'll go a step further. PISA did a study with 31 million students. 40% of students across the world say, my teacher doesn't care about my learning. My teacher doesn't teach me till I know. 40% of kids. Ouch. Ouch. When I look at what many people argue, oh, what he found was teacher-student relationships are important, and they are. Sometimes we forget, teachers, our responsibility is also student-student relationships. But why is the key question. And there's one reason why. The major reason is we build those relationships so it's okay that we do not know. No student comes to your school to learn that which they already know. It's what they don't know. And when I find Graham Nuttall's work that shows 40% of every class, the kids already know, 40% of the work in every class, all the kids know already. The problem in our schools is it's too easy. We just do tasks. And in a lot of doing, there's no learning. Your students are improvement engines. They want to be challenged. And most of all, it's this notion that if I don't know, then school's the place for me. But what happens in classes when kids don't know? We ask them. They all say the same thing. I ask the teacher. Watch them. No, they don't. The only kids who ask the teacher are the kids who already know or think they know. The rest of them look like they know and hope they don't get chosen. And I'm a granddad now. I've got 7 grandkids. I'm watching them starting school, and I'm seeing them at age 5 and 6 already working this game out. And it's devastating that they think that if they're not bright, then this place is not for them. I had the luxury of taking my eldest, she's now 8, when she was 5, I took her to school on day 1, picked her up, because both her parents are teachers, so I had the luxury of doing that. And I realised on the car on the way home that something was wrong. She was very quiet. She wasn't bubbly like her normal self. And I said, Emma, what's going on? Tell me what happened at school today. And she said, Granddad, I don't want to go to school. I said, okay. What's this? She said, I can't read. I said, being a little smarter than her, I said, Emma, if you could read, there's no point to going to school. Now, to show she was smarter than me, she said, oh, Granddad, does that mean when I learn to read, I don't have to go again? But the point she was making, she already was doing that comparative. The teachers kind of, by default, allowed her to look at other kids who could read and she couldn't, and she had already classified herself. She didn't feel as she belonged. I think that's devastating. We talk about the emotional and social skills, and I worry post-COVID, it's almost as if someone decided that we never did it before. We've always worried about those things. When I look at the research about what social and emotional skills about learning are, it's these. Do we as teachers create conditions so that students are appropriately challenged? And the art of teaching is what's challenging for you may be differently to what's challenging for you. But learning is a challenge. Learning is a struggle. Learning is hard work. And they should be the best terms in our vocabulary. And how we build that sense of efficacy, confidence, and motivation and belonging. Engagement. When we asked 1,000-odd teachers around Victoria about how do they know? Let me ask you, how do you know your students are engaged in the work? And the dominant answer was, they were doing the work. And you know that in a lot of doing, there is no learning. A lot of our students, particularly above average students, love to do, even if there's no challenge. And so what we did, because I have this philosophy of life as an academic, there's thousands of academics who study failure, I only want to study success. We built a model of engagement where we looked at the disruptive student, and sometimes they're disruptive in math and not in music and so on, so this is not a classification of a kid. What are you right now? And we ask our students, are you avoiding? Are you withdrawing? Yes, participating, doing, and striving and driving. And I'm going to argue here today that what we want to develop are students who can drive their learning. We also have an app, and it's commercial, so I won't say what it is because there's hundreds of them out there. And what happens is the teacher asks during the day at appropriate time to get on the app and identify what your feeling is and your emotion is. We have about 300,000 to 400,000 students who have done it. What's the dominant? Oh, I'm going to tell you it's dominant. What's the dominant emotion in our classrooms? Yeah. And what is boredom? The lack of challenge. 40, unbelievable that this is the... Now, here's the good news. Teachers, you caused it. You can fix it. I want you to know when your students are bored and not deny it and not classify the child as lacking motivation. Every single kid who enters your classroom enters with a very deep reservoir of motivation. They just choose not to spend it on your stuff. And I think this is the issue about whole social and emotional learning. It's the boredom. And part of that also relates to the expectations that teachers have, which students feel. And as you're going to see, students adopt. And what Christine Ruby-Davies and our team found out, that teachers who have high expectations tended to have for all the students and are incredibly successful. And sadly, teachers who have low expectations have it for all the students and are equally successful in the wrong direction. And the biggest influence from the home, as much as socioeconomic status, if not a bit more, is the parental expectation. And look at the power of the student expectation. There's a plus and negative there, though. If kids have an expectation they're going to get a C and they get a C, they're happy. Our job is to mess that up. Our job is to raise their expectations. And I think it's fascinating when we did a piece of work looking at 1,000 adults who nominated their best teacher, and we asked them why. 2 reasons. Either that teacher turned you on to their passion, and or that teacher saw something in you you didn't see yourself. Not once did a parent say because it was music or English or phys ed. It was passion and expectations. And we know in our work, in our visible learning work, if we go into a school and the expectations, oh, the kids aren't very good, the parents aren't supportive, the resources are terrible, we haven't got enough money, we don't go because we know we're wasting our time because that expectation filters right around the school. And when we go into classrooms, and this is only 4 of a list of about 40 things, the message here is a dramatically different nature of the classroom as a function of how the teacher thinks. And this leads to a really critical finding. When you go into the different classrooms, those 2 lots of teachers are doing the same things. This is why I would argue I do not care less how you teach. Why do we have so much professional learning about teaching, dialogue about teaching? I don't care how you teach. I care about the impact of how you teach. I care about how teachers think about how they teach. And this is the key issue with the nature of going from climate to learning to progress to achievement. Students driving their learning. Well, the first thing is learning. What we do, and I invite you to do this, get a small group of teachers and say, how do you learn? What's a good learner in your classroom? And you soon discover that even as adults, even in this business, we don't have much of a language of learning. If I ask those same teachers, what's your theory of teaching? We're going for hours. We've all got one. Very strong theories of teaching. What's your theory of learning? Some people say, oh, Piaget. Yeah, he wrote his book 100 years ago this year. A lot's happened since then. But after a while, we find that teachers are quite energetic. They come up with answers, and we say we don't care what the answer is as long as there's no more than about 6 or 8 of them. Step 1. Step 2, interview the students. Who's the best learner in this class and why? What's a good learner in this class? And you know what they say, almost to a student around the world. A good learner is someone who comes well prepared, sits up straight, and watches the teacher work. compliance. And you know why we want compliance. But my point is, you put the teacher's notions of learning up in the classroom, rich, exciting. You put the students up. If they're not compatible, there's your starting point. And it's quite dramatic. And yes, our work, it doesn't take long for teachers to move their students to being more curious. The second one is this notion of complexity, difficulty. And it's going to turn out to be very critical. And we make the distinction between the knowledge and the facts, the ideas and the concepts, and the knowing with, the deeper ways, the procedures, the connections, the relationships, the argumentation, the reasoning. And part of that deeper is the transfer. And I want to argue here today that the effectiveness of various teaching methods, the effectiveness of various learning measures dramatically differ depending on our focus. One of the other sets of data we use is transcripts of 20,000 classrooms. 95% of teacher talk is about the facts, the knowing that, the surface. 95% of the feedback, written and oral, is about the facts. And there's a conspiracy. Students above average prefer the facts because that's the game they're winners at. And given the technology we use to get that 20,000 hours, I know exactly to the decimal point on average what percentage of the time you talk. What percentage of time do you talk? The average is 89%. How could you ever know your impact? Shut up and listen. Listen to the students' thinking. Listen to the students' ways of going about choosing learning strategies. Of course there's nothing wrong with teacher talk. And certainly I'm going to show you in a moment. Teacher talk at the fact stage, great. But I want to reduce that amount of teacher talk at the deeper phase. My answer is 2. I want you to have 2 success criteria, one about the facts and the knowledge, and one about the deeper processing. I want you to have 2 assignments. I particularly want you to have 2 assessments. For example, if you were doing my course before I retired on instructional leadership, my first assignment was calculate an effect size. And a few weeks later, separate, my assignment was interpret the effect size. I'm greedy. I want both. We have too many debates in education about either or, knowledge-rich or deep thinking. I know that all those deep thinking methods, problem-based, problem-solving, discovery, inquiry, have incredibly low effect sizes. Sorry. Evidence is a bit of a nuisance at times to our religious beliefs, but they do. And part of my fascination is why. It turns out that problem-based learning for students who don't have the knowledge, facts, and ideas is a waste of time. We introduce it too early. We also know that direct instruction, explicit teaching, is very good for teaching the facts and not so good for teaching the content, for teaching the depth. This is why I want 2. And I find it fascinating when I look at the 480 different teaching methods that Bob Bazzano put together, that we threw out 400 of them because they had no relationship to the content. No wonder, it's random. We need to be smarter about our assessment, our tasks, our activities, to get across to students that we value both. So what do our students do by age 8? They've worked out the game. They know how to be safe. No lots. And that's not the only thing we want. And notice what I'm saying. It's not either or. I want students to know how to calculate effect sizes, if for no other reason. It's so simple that if they forget, they have no guilt asking some other teacher to do it or asking a student to do it. But I do want them to know. I also want them to know how to interpret. And I bet in every one of your classrooms, you want both. But that's not what happens. So I ask you to look at that answer for 2. So let's go on to the learning strategies. We did a meta-synthesis of learning strategies. We identified 400 of them. We had this initial aim that we'd wanted to get it down to the desirable dozen, we called it. Could we do it? And yes, we could, but we had to build a model of learning. And our model is when you first expose students to content and facts, then when you consolidate it, because remember, kids are humans, at most, we can remember between 4 and 6 things at once. We have to consolidate. And then you go on to deeper learning and consolidate it and then transfer. That's the model. There's the top 12. When you first expose students, do they have the skills to organise and summarise? They need a coat hanger. Otherwise, it's just incoming. And you know what happens. You do it yourselves. After 4 to 5 minutes, you turn off. It's overwhelming. And what I'm trying to do in this lecture this evening is give you 4 coat hangers. I'm not going down into the data and the depth. I know, because about 8 years ago, I released all the data, free, on a website, MetaX. If you ever want to see all the data, update it once or twice a year. But if I told you about all that data, you'd walk out of here sufficiently confused. I want the big ideas. And I ask you, how good are you with 5-year-olds and 10-year-olds and 15-year-olds, teaching them how to summarise and organise? Not giving them the summarise and organising, but teaching them to do it. And one of my fears with AI is it will do it for them. But they have to do it to bring those ideas. At this stage, memorisation, rote learning, has an effect size of 0.03. But look at the consolidation phase. It screams up to 0.96. There's a right time to memorise and there's a wrong time. And I'm not sure, educators, that we're as good as we think we are at teaching consolidation. What we do instead is we say, oh, she can consolidate it easily, she's bright. No, we need to teach every student. And I think the distributed practice one is the one that most fascinates me. Here in Germany, the very first study ever done in education psychology, 1856 by Ebbinghaus, was on space practice. And he asked, is it better to do 10 problems today or 1 problem each over 10 days? It's the most replicated study. It's the most meta-analyses. Overwhelmingly, space practice wins. Have you ever seen a textbook that talks about it? When someone did an analysis of 150 textbooks in initial teacher education in the US, 150 textbooks. How many pages in those 150 textbooks first was spent on learning? 5. And how many about space practice? 0. How many of you know about space practice? How many of you actually do it? Word of warning, your kids don't like it. They'd rather get it out of the way all of a sudden. But in terms of their learning, look at the size of the effect. The first one of you in the room that could write a textbook for kids that's in space practice would be a winner. Now, there's a new notion that's come up called interleaving. Didn't make the list. It's getting up, it's climbing. Very simple. 48-minute lesson. You do 10 minutes on topic A. You do 10 minutes on topic B. You do 10 minutes on topic A. You do 10 minutes on topic B. You almost double the rate of learning. And what's more? You double the rate of understanding and depth. All of us need 3 to 5 opportunities before we learn something spaced over time. Like some argue, oh, it's about sleep. No, it's about doing it over many days. And so I just think it's fascinating, and I think we need to be smarter. Now, I think there is good news on the horizon. I think AI will be very good at giving kids second and third opportunities after you've had your first opportunity to help them consolidate, to then move on to the deeper learning, evaluating, self-regulation, and then going into consolidating it. This is the time for student voice. This is the time for self-questioning, self-explanations, self-consequences. Student voice at the knowing that stage, 0 to negative. Why? Because kids give each other the wrong information and they're more likely to remember it if their peer gives it than if you give it. But at this stage, I want to hear them in the learning pad. I want to hear them thinking aloud. Like, I've known Jens for a long time, and I know that in any group, if a question is asked, he gets it immediately. I'm sitting there saying, how did he do that? And then when I ask him, he says, oh, I knew it. Now here's the good news. I've actually performed brain surgery on Jens. I've opened up his scalp, and in there, he's got a grasshopper. And that grasshopper hops over here to get the answer, realizes it's the wrong way to go. He's very good at error management. It hops back, it hops over here, whatever, and it gets the right answer in a millisecond. And he says, it was easy. I want that grasshopper. I want to hear the processes he used. I want that language of learning. Why do I call my work visible learning? Learning is not visible. I want to make it visible. I want those students that are sitting there trying to work out how the other students do it to have strategies, particularly error management. We all do it. You do it. You make a mistake, you fix it. Many kids make a mistake and they're embarrassed. I can't do it. Incidentally, we had a nice discussion in our team about what we call our model, because we wanted a sticky idea to put it together so you never forget it. How many of you know Kenny Rogers, The Gambler? You know that song? Came to Germany? Or does it date me? Well, one of the themes in The Gambler is you've got to know when to hold them, you've got to know when to play them. That's the Kenny Rogers model. But my point is, I think we need to be a lot smarter about how we teach the strategies of learning. I have asked you, for example, that if I came into your classroom, I bet you have thousands, if not tens of thousands of measures of achievement. It's not easy, it's not difficult, is it? How many measures of learning do you have? Now, we've developed one. It's free on our foundation site. You can use, your kids can use. And my point is, let's have that discussion. Your kids are obsessed with learning. That's why they play their video games, their sport, and their social life. They come to class and they hear us obsessed about how we teach. And they know that every time they hit a new teacher, it's different. Now, get me right, I have nothing wrong with teaching. But remember, I'm greedy. I want both. I want more. So what does it mean for a student driving their instruction? What does it mean when I say I want teachers to see learning through the eyes of students, and I want students to become their teachers? I want them to know their current level of understanding. I want them to know what success looks like. I want them to know that they can have multiple opportunities. They can have an incredible amount of feedback to move towards this thing. Now think of it. I'm a little obsessed with Angry Birds. They know my prior achievement, my last score. They know how to set success criteria that's not too hard, because then I wouldn't bother, not too easy, because I sure as heck wouldn't play it, and not too boring. And they know to give me multiple opportunities. And no one tells me when I fail in Angry Birds that I'm stupid and I'm dumb and I can't do it. I can't, first few times. But I get lots of the feedback. I know how to ask my teenage kids, etc., etc. And what happens when I get here? Not like many teachers. Oh, good work, you got there. Hand it in, go out and play. No, they raise it. And I'm obsessed in learning. As I would argue, that's what I want to see in our classrooms. Students are obsessed with knowing where they are, where they have to go. This is why we're obsessed with success criteria. Telling the students what success looks like up front. Showing them what an A and a B and a C is. Why should it be a secret? Why should they have to guess what you think is valuable? They don't in other parts of their lives. And what's more, and be careful here, I not only want to tell them the success criteria, I want to know that they know what success looks like, not just something up on the board. And so when I come into your class, where are you at in your learning relative to where you need to be? What does it mean to be a good learner and good piece of work in this area? And particularly with AI coming, I think I have an 80-20 rule for teachers and kids. It'll do 80% of our work. Yeah, it will. But that other 20% is quality control. It's us. Do you teach your students quality control? Wow, they're going to need it even more going over the next few years. And this is what we mean by a self-driving school. We published a book recently sort of condensing visible learning and kind of our little internal joke. It's the visual visible learning book, but they wouldn't let me call it that. It's all in lovely pictures, trying to make this point about the signature practices. All right, we've got a climate, we've got a purpose. Students driving their instruction. We know how to do it with an engagement model. We know how to do it by looking at the surface and the deep. And then we come to this theme of know thy impact. And remember when we ditched that ranking many years ago, we introduced this notion of know thy impact. It's, I want you to choose high probability interventions, but it's what happens when you implement them. If you implement them and they don't work, I don't care they were high. They didn't work. Stop it. When you implement a high probability that works, the three questions. What worked well and what didn't work well? That is, what did you teach well? What did you didn't teach well? Who did you teach well and who didn't you teach well? And how greater was the growth? And I take strong argument that when you walk into a classroom, leaders, when you walk into a staff room, I want you to say, my job here today is to evaluate my impact. And all good things follow. It's not to get through the curriculum. It's not to make real world, authentic, interesting tasks for kids. All that stuff. It's evaluate. And the kids feel it. And they know that you care about them. Because you want to maximize the impact of all your students. Not just the 5 or 6 that are attending and does the work. You want to get quality in terms of raising that standard, in terms of the growth. So what do we mean by impact? I would ask that in every school we have a common understanding of impact. And please, if your concept of impact is increasing the test scores, what a boring school that is. But I want test scores in there. These are my 9. I want to know about whether students feel invited to come. I want to know about whether they have skills in choosing appropriate learning strategies at the right time in their learning. I want to know what their progress is, as well as their achievement, because it's through the climate, the learning, you get progress to achievement. I want to know about their respect for self and respect for others. I want to know that they can work alone and work in groups, and that's not as easy as we think it is. I want to know all of these, and my dashboard includes these. I want to specifically look at achievement, because I made a comment earlier about high achieving schools are not necessarily our best schools. Remember, I'm greedy. I want achievement and I want progress. That's easy. Yeah, that's harder. We use effect sizes, not too difficult. We can show you how to do it. It's all up on the website, blah, blah, blah. That's the detail. I don't think anybody wants to be in a school where the students start above average, but they don't make a year's growth. They're cruising. 50% of schools in Australia are in that zone. That's what's killing our nation. Yeah, when I talk to those schools, they say, oh, what's the problem? They achieve well, parents are happy, they get into the courses they want. I'm saying, yeah, but you're allowing no growth. You're just standing still for 5 years. They are. No one wants to be down there where they start below average and they don't make a year's growth. And my data says that there ain't many schools in any system down there in the Western world. What's wrong? And shouldn't we esteem schools where they start below average and they make more than a year's growth? And of course, everyone wants to be in the lucky country. They start above and they make more than a year's growth. Here's my point, Germany. High achieving schools are not necessarily the best, and it's killing your narrative. Your parents are seeking high achieving schools to defend cruising. The best schools in Germany are those. And it changes the dynamic. Of course, as a granddad, I want my girls in one of those schools. I don't want them in a cruising school. And as a granddad, I have done all the analysis of the local schools, and some of them that look really good, they were beautiful. Oh, wow, you should see their web pages and their advertisements about how they're a high achieving school on our national tests. But I know if they went there, they'd go nowhere. My point is, teachers, I want you to change how you think about what's valuable. Do I care about high achievement? Absolutely. But you get there through progress. I can show you students. Putting on the same graph. Look at Emma and Noah. On the achievement, they are the top 2 students in that class. And I bet they go home feeling very happy. And as a teacher, yeah, I did a great job with Leon and Noah and Emma. No, you didn't. What did you do to Emma that you didn't do to Noah? Noah is almost that class's biggest loser. Going nowhere. And look at Leon and Mia. Yeah, near the bottom on achievement. But I want to understand, teacher, what did you do to Leon that you didn't do to Mia? Leon is one of your class's most successful learners. And by arithmetic, the more he goes that way, he has to go up that way. And so we look at these kinds of data and say, look at the Noahs and the Mias of the world compared to the Emmas and the Leons. What's happening here? And we do a lot of classroom work. It's a sin to go in a classroom and watch a teacher teach. Because all you do is tell that teacher to teach better like you do. No. 80% of what happens in your classroom you do not see or hear. I have very little time for all that self-reflection nonsense. That privilege is only 20%. I want someone, and we do it, go into your classroom and we're going to watch the Noah and Maya and Leah and Emma. And we're going to help the teacher understand what they do. And the Mias and the Noahs, particularly the Noahs, they're very good at looking like they're busy and nothing is happening. One of my kids was like that. He went to school for sport, girls and lunch. In fact, it was a bit traumatic actually. When he was about 11, one night he said, Dad, I'm a fraud at school. He said, I don't know what's going on. He's not having a clue. Now, besides the fact that it really caused me a lot of angst as a parent, it's kind of interesting that he was the first of my 3 kids who became a teacher, but that's another story. And what I do is keep trying to get deeper and deeper about where we're going with this, because as you can see, it's how teachers think that matters more than what they do. And this notion of evaluative thinking, this notion of how we can get teachers involved in moderation and these kind of tasks. And I've spent a lot of time over the last few years looking at the different ways teachers think. Now, this next slide's impossible, and it's meant to be. Here's my problem. We now have mind frames for teachers, leaders, parents, students. We've got one coming out on assessment, special education. It's getting overwhelming. Look at the teacher one. In fact, that book, as of today, is now history, because the 2nd edition came out today with my German colleague Klaus Zara. And we've got 10 ways of thinking that discriminate between those teachers in the grey zone and those in the yellow zone. Actually, we've got one repeated 10 times. That first one. When you walk into a class and you say, my job is to evaluate my impact. And I love the word evaluate because it implies value. What is it you value? I also like it because I'm married to a professor of evaluation, but that's another detail. And so we look at all those notions across all those mind frames, and we come back to this way of thinking that discriminates those teachers. Those teachers who are seeking evidence about how they can improve their impact, compared to those teachers who are seeking evidence that they did a good job. And we call this evaluative thinking. The 3 impact questions I mentioned earlier. What did I teach well? What did I not teach well? Who did I teach well? Who did I not teach well? And am I making sufficient growth? As the Austrian philosopher of the last century of philosophy of science, Karl Popper, science, he argues, science progresses by asking what evidence would you accept you are wrong? I have to say I was very influenced from his work for no other reason that he was my teacher, but that's another detail. Same with teachers. And you know those teachers, they're constantly looking for where it didn't work, who didn't understand, what's going on here. Can you stand in the shoes of your students and understand their world? In the staff room, can you stand in the shoes of your colleagues and understand their world? You don't have to agree with them, but that notion of empathy, you feel it when it happens. Our next book, given there's thousands of books on teacher talk and student voice, we decided that we're going to focus on listening and teaching the skills of listening. to adults and to kids. What more higher mark of equity and distinction that we could give to you to demonstrate that I have listened to you? Again, I don't have to agree. But if you're like me, sometimes I wait for you to be quiet so I can start talking. That's not empathy. And am I prepared to work with my colleagues to critique? Now, Janet looks at this list and she says, oh, no, she says, you're making it too hard. I thought, that's not bad. It's pretty straightforward, isn't it? Huh. So after a while, I got sick of being told off, so I said the obvious. Well, what do I say? And she said, evaluative thinkers are nosy. They want to get inside and understand Matthias. And I want to be a little intrusive. And sometimes he resists. He says, no, I'm okay. No, Matthias, I don't think you are understanding. And tell me how you're thinking. Now, he says, he doesn't want to tell me how he's thinking because he doesn't know what the right answer is. Well, I want to know how you got to the wrong answer, because only then can I actually help you understand. And remember, now 20,000 hours of classroom observation, we ask the questions, how many times did a teacher think aloud? Or how many times did a teacher ask a student to think aloud? What would it be in your school? In our 20,000 hours, 0. Classrooms are not about learning. Students learn very quickly that it's invisible and it's personal. They learn very quickly to label themselves if they're not good learners. And that's the antithesis of being nosy. And I want to do it together. Collective advocacy about impact. I just think it's unbelievably fascinating. It turns out to be very difficult, but it's fascinating. One of the highest effects, think of this, when you teachers get together and critique your thoughts about what progress is, what standards are, about your impact, your students' rate of learning increases by a factor of 3 to 4, and they're not even in the room. This is why in my political job, I spent my time entirely arguing we must invest in our educators. Not because they're bad, they're not. Look, Minister, I can show you the data. We have an incredible number of brilliant teachers. Minister, I told this to all 66 of them. It should be a badge of honour in your term of office that you never go to Finland, Singapore and Shanghai. We have excellence right here in Kiel. Some ministers called me. Don't believe you. I took them to schools. I had the data. And it doesn't take them long to realise that excellence is here. Our problem is the variability within our schools. What do? We tweak the curriculum. Oh my goodness, we worry about the assessments, we talk about the structures, we talk about the resources, we talk about the parents. No, it's us. And yes, I get criticised. Oh, you're blaming teachers. No, I'm not. I'm actually crediting teachers. Think of this statistic. In the year 1900, what percentage of the world was literate and numerate? 14%, 1-4. In the year 2000, what percentage of the world was literate and numerate? 86%. Why? And don't tell me it's curriculum, don't tell me it's communication, don't tell me it's the internet, don't tell me it's resources. It's one reason and one reason only, because of you, teachers. I think someone writing the history of the 20th century, that is the most remarkable fact. 14%, 86% of the world. Yeah, and the 14% that are illiterate still, it's a large number. But let's think of the success. This is what I want. And I know teachers of all professions, you're pretty good critics. I want to capture that. Now, we did spend time trying to do it, and we got into struggles, so we invented a new notion. Student self-efficacy, collective impact. And we found out there had to be certain skills to teach kids to collectively impact. How to critique. The idea is not the person. How to work in groups. One of the biggest correlates, turn-taking. A lot of groups, think about your last staff meeting, your last professional learning. How much turn-taking? If there's no turn-taking, there's no collective. There has to be a task that requires multiple opinions. If it's about solving the bus timetables, the smartest person in the room can do that. The rest of you don't have to worry about it. But look at the impact. It also then relates to how we think When's good's good enough? Our moderation. Our helping each other see our impact. I think it's incredibly powerful. So, people of Kiel, these are my 4 messages. These are the 4 messages underlying the 400 million students. These are the messages that I want you to take away. It's about how you think, and remembering that there are so many of you who think in that grey zone. And to use the COVID metaphor, I want to spread the virus of those in the grey zone so that those in the yellow zone pick it up. And those of you who are starting initial teacher education, I know, for good reason, why you're obsessed about management and teaching methods, as you should be. But I also want you to think about how you think of yourselves as a teacher. And I want to remind you, every single one of us in this room, I would argue, came into this profession for one reason: to have an impact on students. All I ask is that you know thy impact. Thank you.